At World Remit, we understand what the journey is about, how it can sometimes take a little distance to bring us a little closer together. With ways to save more when you send more, World Remit is here for you, so you can be there for them. At World Remit, we understand what the journey is about, how it can sometimes take a little distance to bring us a little closer together. With ways to save more when you send more, World Remit is here for you, so you can be there for them.
This program is brought to you by World Remit, a fast, reliable and better way to send money.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Ghanaian Community Awareness Forum. Today we are here to continue our conversation on the vaccines in relation to the ongoing pandemic. We have experts today from various sectors of the health profession, and we'll be here to articulate some of the issues that we have identified that as important to the needs of our community. My name is Emmanuel Kwesi, the chairman of Ghana Union, moderating this program tonight. I have with me a great team of technical experts behind the scenes who are delivering to you this live Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube sessions. Let me also acknowledge the fact that this program is brought to you by support of World Remit, a money transfer, international money transfer company, reliable, fast, and efficient way of sending money to friends and family abroad, specifically Ghana. I also want you to be aware that this program is put together with collaboration from the Ghana Nurses Association, the Ghana Union UK and Ireland, the Nightingale Nurses Association, and the Ghanaian Doctors and Dentists all supporting. We also have the Western Region Association of Nurses as part of the partnership. Our topic today will look at risks, benefits, and mortalities in areas of COVID and the vaccines, and obviously we are going to go into detail as we take the stage from the experts who will speak to the issues. At this point, I would also like to recognize the contribution and the support from Omega Live TV, who are broadcasting this live on their platform across the world, and Ghana High Commission for endorsing the program as official for Ghanaian community, and we thank them for their support. I'm going to go through a few house rules, something basic, but it's important that we all take note of the fact that all audience on this platform listening to us will be muted throughout the session, except when we get to the question and answer sessions. There will be no self-muting access, unmuting access where you can unmute yourself, unless, of course, you are called, in which case the team will let you in and be able to ask your questions. Where possible, if you are called, please show your face and let's see you and give us your full name so we know who we are interacting with. Questions put to us in advance can also still keep coming in on 077 343 12820. 077 343 12820. You can do that by WhatsApp and we will have it and read it out. At some point, we'll go through advanced questions where most people who have sent their questions will be addressed with the expert. And also, we will have an expert at the chat room who will answer some of the questions that you want to be answered before we get to the Q&A sessions. Please, in as much as possible, try and go straight to your point, one question at a time. And when we have plenty of time, you can come back and ask another question. Also, be assured that in the chat room, there's an expert there. So if you have any question, please feel free to put it there and it will be answered. The expert will find it necessary if they believe they have to share your question with everybody else. I will go straight and introduce your panelists for today, the experts who have volunteered their time to be with us today. We have Dr. Valentine Ngwa. Dr. Valentine Ngwa is a consultant physician in elderly medicine and acute medicine at Mid Yorkshire Hospital NHS Trust in Wakefield, UK. Dr. Ngwa is also a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of London and Edinburgh and a research fellow in aging. Dr. Ngwa will seek to take us through COVID-19 risks and benefits categories with respect to BAME community groups, and he'll go into detail when he takes the floor. Our second panelist this evening will be Dr. Javid Ahmed. Dr. Javid is currently a clinical lead of microbiologist at Maid and Success South Essex Hospital, South End, Basildon and Bloomfield, and an honorary consultant virologist at King's College Hospital, London. He will also take us through some of the scientific aspects of the vaccine, how the world came about this vaccine, how we got to this far with this pandemic, what are the areas that has been put in together for the world, the government around the world to work together to come up with solutions at this point for all of us. And he will go into much more detail in areas that he believes will serve the interest of our community. We also have ourselves on this forum, Dr. Robert Khan. Dr. Khan is a general practitioner and a partner at Gravesend, Kent, and author. He's also a pastor and a community health educationist. From a GP perspective, Dr. Khan sees regular people like you and I. He will be one of the people you would like to see when you are not well before you get referred to any other specialist care, depending on the circumstance. So Dr. Khan has a broad idea of everyone's situation throughout this pandemic, and he will share light from that perspective with us. In the chat room, we will have Sedna Agama, who is Associate Director of Medicines Optimization. She's a Chief Pharmacist. She was with us last 2 weeks at the South West London Clinical Commissioning Group, London Borough of Merton. So a very qualified, articulate individual, professional who will spend time at the chat room to answer any queries, any questions, or anything that you would like to know before we get to the Q&A. And she will join us at the Q&A to help us with any questions that hasn't been answered already. So these are your panelists and the audience. We welcome you once again to this forum. As always, we will observe a minute silence in memory of those that we have lost, so dearly lost in the past year, and still counting in some cases around the world. For their memory, we will honor a minute silence. May the souls of those who have departed rest well in peace, and may their passing be a blessing to us all. Thank you. We'll go straight and conduct a poll. It's one of our key reasons for being here is to find out as a community how we are getting on with this campaign and how much more we need to do to try and get all of us to a safer end at the end. So, Linda, if you can project the poll for us, the first poll, to find out as a community, as a people, where are we with this awareness and the vaccines and everything else going on around the world and UK specifically. Okay. Right, I believe the poll is done. We will get back to you with the result at a later stage. At this point, we'll go straight to panel presentation. And our first panelist for this evening will be Dr. Valentine Ngua, who will take the stage and take us through what he has for us at this evening. Dr. Ngua, please proceed.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, or wherever you are. I would share my screen if I may. I've got some slides. Right. Once more, thanks again. I will be talking this evening on the vulnerability to severe disease in COVID. As we all know, a large majority of people who are going to have the infection would not have much symptoms or very mild symptoms. At the end of the day today, the idea is to try and see who are those who have severe symptoms and who are those who die and why do they have those severe symptoms. So an outline, I'll give a brief talk on the risk factors involved. I will try and differentiate between age, in which we know age is a very strong risk factor in COVID. Talk about the new kid of the block, which is the hyperfunction theory, which underpins many of the vulnerabilities that we see. That said, your risk of having COVID infection depends on two things. One, or your risk of having severe COVID depends on one, the risk of getting the infection in the first place, and two, the risk that when you do get the infection, you will have a serious one, so your individual vulnerability. Now, the risk of getting the infection in the first place is dependent on two main factors. One, where you are in the community, the prevalence of the COVID in the community. So if you live in an area where there many people do have COVID, then your chance of having it is higher. And also what your personal circumstances are, like your job, whether you're those that the type that goes out and meet many people as a delivery drivers. Let's just keep this slide at the back of our mind. We're going to come back to it when we start talking about the vulnerability as concerns the BEN community. But that said, what COVID has shown to us is a difference in what you understand how infections normally happen. Normally, we know infections happen in a U-shaped format. So in childhood, in infancy, your risk is higher of actually having severe infections or dying because the immunity is not strong enough. But that risk decreases up to about 8, 9, and maybe 10 years, and then it starts getting worse. So there's a typical U-shape of risk. However, COVID is showing us a linear graph where the risk in infancy in the 20s is very, very minimal. Starts going up in the 30s, and then by 60, it becomes exponential. And it is said that the risk of dying from COVID at the age 60 is 30 times the risk of dying from COVID at age 20, which means age is a very, very strong risk factor of COVID-19. But those who say age is just a number might actually have something to say. Here are two ladies celebrating their 80th birthday. Both of them are 80 years old. While the one on the left is wheelchair bound, and of course, looks like she has many other diseases. The lady on the right is bubbling with life. Looks like she's just about to go to the nightclub that evening. So the two 80-year-olds, but they're aging differently. And what I want us to look here is to look at or to conceptualize yourself like in a car. I'm going to look at these two ladies like they're going down to London. Those who have not been to England or who have not been up north, Leeds is up north. So imagine you're going down to London and it takes about 3 hours if you're driving fast. Now, if London is a destination for many diseases of old age, then the lady on the left looks like she's speeding to London. Meanwhile, the lady on the right is going slowly. So she's at 70 miles an hour. She's going to get there in 2 hours, 30 minutes. She's at 40 miles an hour. She's going to get there in 5 hours. Why this is important is because we're going to understand how vulnerability are tied to aging, because the diseases that we're getting are diseases of aging. Nobody has died from old age alone. You die from diseases that come with old age, the diabetes, the hypertension, the stroke disease, the COPD, the dementias. So if you keep somebody as long as possible, they're going to pick that disease up. Whether it's at 100 years old or 120 years old, they're going to get it. We age differently. Some are going to age faster, and some are going to age slowly, which therefore means that the issue is not just the chronological age, it is the comorbidities that come with age. And that's what defines the biological age. So your chronological age is not a big issue. The issue is the diseases that comes with it. And those were called the deficits. And now define a deficit here in 3 formats. 1, it gets worse with age, it leads to a worse outcome, and doesn't saturate easily. So let's take, for example, the type 2 diabetes. You don't get it when you're younger, of course, unless it's exceptionally rare. But as you get older, you get it. It leads to a worse outcome because you can have strokes and heart attacks by being a diabetic. But not everybody has it, so it doesn't saturate easily. So you can call that a deficit. And the more of those deficits you accumulate, the more you define your biological age. So you could be biologically 40, you could be chronologically 40, but biologically 60. So your risk will fall in the line of somebody who is 60. Now, this biological age is what's linked to COVID vulnerability. As we know, quite a few of the people who died from COVID had 1 or 2 comorbidities. The press tells us that all the time. But these were just words. It doesn't mean anything in numbers. What does that mean? Someone might ask, what does that biological age mean? So in the UK, in order to protect staff working in the NHS, this group called Alama they tried to put numbers to those words. So those words of comorbidities mean something. And what they did is they looked at a lot of epidemiological data, and they said, if you got diabetes, your chance that you've increased your age by 5 years. If you're black, for example, black male, you've increased your age by 5 years as well. If you got whatever disease condition, they did that for most disease conditions. The reason being, you could now add those disease conditions by numbers and increase to somebody's chronological age to give what their biological age is expected to be. Let's take, for example, Mr. A, who is 48 years old chronologically, but he's got type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and chronic kidney disease. If you go by the Alama graph, which you can see, and I hope it's projected well on your screens, you can see that by being that he's a black male, he's already got 5 years added to his age. And the fact that his BMI is between 35 and 39, he's got another 5 years. The fact that he's got type 2 diabetes, which is well controlled, he's got another 4 years, and so forth. So if you look at his chronological age, he's chronologically 48, but his biological age is running at about 74. I must warn, Alama use this for risk profiling staff in the NHS, so you can get people away from high intensity areas if they've got significant risk. Like this gentleman at 74, he is at a moderate severity, which means therefore that he should be having extra care, because he's one of those, if they get COVID, they'll have severe COVID and actually not do well from it. Now, somebody might ask, but we're getting a lot of people who are coming down with COVID, who are younger and who got no comorbidities. So how do you explain that? How do you explain that somebody who is 40, fit and well, have no comorbidities, has severe COVID, had to go to ICU? And it goes back to what we're talking about, comorbidities. But now let's go back to our cars going down to London. Because London was a destination for comorbidity, but you've met them in Sheffield. You will know who is speeding and who is slowing down. So you can already know that the person who is speeding, though has not yet ramped up those comorbidities, hasn't reached London yet, is the person who is already on course to getting it. And there comes the theory called the hyperfunction theory. It has been used to explain why people age differently. Like you went to primary school with somebody and 20 years down the line, you meet those two friends again and they look different ages. The one look like is the elder brother of the other one because they're aging faster. This is a process whereby your cells are actually excessively functioning, which means that the organs are excessively functioning and ultimately it's going to lead to damage. Why it hasn't led to damage for some people, but the noise it is gathering, the debris it is creating by that excess functioning is what actually ramps up the inflammation, which is a big issue in how your vulnerability to diseases are, particularly with COVID-19. So what does that mean? That means therefore that the more faster you're going, the more you're ramping up debris, the more your chance of having severe COVID is. And this could explain. Let us remember, the problem with COVID is not just the infection, it's what the body does to fight the infection. Because the body throws out chemicals which were initially meant to be helping, but are causing most harm. And that's what's called the cytokine storm. It is a hyperfunction. The same with the fact that we know that people with COVID are also having a lot of blood clots in their system. It is also another element of hyperfunctionality of their blood clotting system. I put this in blue because it's very important that we understand the severity of increased blood clots with COVID. We're getting press nowadays of the AstraZeneca vaccine having some blood clot issue, though it has been ruled by the European Medicine Association that that's not true, and just a few minor cases that are being looked into. We have to realize that the infection has got multiple times risk of getting clots, and that's why we highlighted that. Now let's go back to our previous slide, which I think was the second or the third slide. I said, what are the risk factors of getting COVID? Now let's look at the risk factors of getting COVID in the Black and Asian minority ethnic groups. I said the first thing is the risk of getting infected. So if you live in a society where COVID is prevalent in your local community, your risk is higher. We know that members of the BAME community live in societies where there's low socioeconomic environment. They live in multi-generational households. We've known that for years before COVID, because we look at the UK housing survey, we look at the UK census numbers, and we could see that our population is predisposed to getting infected from COVID. And we also know that our population does the job that people facing. So the drivers, the bus drivers, the factory workers, the members that work in jobs that put them in contact with patients, the nurses and carers and doctors and engineers, and all these professions are put you in contact with people, in contact with sick people, so it makes our vulnerability to getting the infection quite high. We've already known that from our workforce survey in the UK. And then the individual vulnerability, which is what I've talked about in terms of comorbidities, in terms of the fact that people that are sitting on a high pedestal on the hyperfunction theory. One thing I'm not ignoring, but not putting here, is the issue of vitamin D as well. On that, I want to say something. It is been found out that vitamin D deficiency is associated with increased risk. But the causation, remember, association is not causation, because some people think that when you give vitamin D when you got COVID, you would get cured. Actually, studies have been done showing that if you give vitamin D during the infection, it doesn't do much. You really need to be getting your vitamin D levels higher before you get the infection, if at all. So just a few suggestions on what to do to reduce your vulnerability to COVID-19. And again, this is going to be a very exhaustive topic, so I'm not going to use a few minutes to actually go through it, but just a few pointers on your COVID-19 is to know your vulnerability and not to sit down and say, well, I'm young, and so I am not vulnerable. Vulnerabilities could be overt and could be covert. Those that know they got hypertension and diabetes, fair enough, they know they got overt comorbidities, but sometimes you do not know until you get the infection, and that's why we're getting younger people in hospital very sick. They never knew they could be that sick. And of course, the normal protection, face, and hands. I try to always be polite, not to tell people, take the vaccine, but to say, consider taking the vaccine. But that's me saying, take the vaccine. I've had two Pfizer vaccines, and sometimes I used to wonder when I tell people come to see me in hospital and I prescribe a medication that I've never taken, and they trust me to take it. And then when I now prescribe a vaccine that I have taken, then they don't trust me to take it. That I don't understand. On hyperfunctionality is a good old lifestyle. Diet, drink, exercise. There's a lot we can talk about this. But one I want to emphasize, which is less spoken about, is sleep. Sleep deprivation is a very big issue with chronic disease. As we know, those who work night shifts, those who work shift work, have a higher risk of having chronic diseases, have a higher risk of dying early. So it's something to actually can't stress enough. And of course, deal with our stress. We do have a lot of stress in society. Personal stress, we need to look after families both here and back home. We need to also look after household here and get households back home. The stress is up. It's quite good to be able to handle personal stress. More especially societal stress. I tend to give this talk and emphasize on things like racism, microaggression, and micro-insult, because it's been studied extensively to show that this causes significant physical, and not just psychological, but physical damage to our BAME community. So whenever that conversation is involved, be part of it to actually kick it. And of course, adequate chronic disease management if you have any chronic diseases. The risk factors show that if your chronic diseases are well managed, your risk is lower than if they are not managed. One thing many people don't always say is the fact that many BAME community members die from non-COVID diseases than just from COVID diseases. because the chronic disease management at that particular point in time was poor. You could understand many people don't want to come to hospital because a lot of infections in the hospital. Just to summarize, therefore, I would say the biological age is more important than the chronological age, though sometimes it's difficult to know which one. You need to know the personal vulnerabilities and try and protect yourself. Some could be overt, some could be covert, but protection is the key. And let me say it again, for those who haven't yet, and I'm glad to see many people want to take the vaccine from the polls, take the vaccine. It is safe. Thank you.
Wow, that's excellent. Until today, we didn't know the age and the area you lived and the ethnic group you come from makes a difference to your lifestyle and how long you live and how easier it is to find yourself either hospitalized or and all that. So, Dr. Ngoa, thank you so much. I'm sure our audience will have a lot to ask when it comes to Q&A. We'll go straight again and present to you Dr. Javid, who will also take us through other aspects of the vaccine, the pandemic itself, how the world came about, how governments are working together in different sectors and in different formats. So I will leave Dr. Javid to continue from here. Thank you, Dr. Javid. Take over.
Hello, everybody. Before I start, let me say my thanks to the chairman, Mr. Watson, panelists here, and people who have spent day and night organizing this webinar, and also to all the people from Ghana and people.
I'm not sure if it's only me, but I think your mic is a bit on the low end. Please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sounds okay.
So, yeah, it's an honor and privilege to be speaking on this forum. And I worked in Southeast London for nearly 10 years at Guy's and St. Thomas's and King's. And my interaction with the Southeast, with the West African community is very, very memorable, and it continues to be so. And it's a pleasure speaking here on this forum. And let me thank you, Chairman, and the co-panelists here, and people who have logged in at this time to listen to us. And particularly, it's an honor listening to Dr. Valentine. And I should say, I am a bit scared because I have some of those comorbidities. Now, my age is actually, you reassured me, but I'm older than what I actually was before the talk. So, okay. So moving on, I appreciate we don't have much time. I want to take the story of this, why we are here and how come we landed here. And it does look like like as if we are living in parallel universe, what has happened in the last 15, 16 months. And let me tell you, the coronaviruses are not new. They have been there since time immemorial. For millennia with us. There are less than half a dozen of other coronaviruses which cause infection, and they have been reduced to causing common cold. We think that over a period of millennia, they have been, at the time of their onset, they were probably very similar to the SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, and then it has slowly melted away as a common cold virus. And we hope that this will be the case for this COVID-19 virus. So what happened in Wuhan in the end of 2019 spilled over because the way this is a respiratory viral disease, and any respiratory viral disease has got a very high propensity to transmit because and when it is a new virus, it simply means people do not have any immunity against this new virus. So it did not come as a surprise when it spilled over China, and then very quickly become a pandemic within when WHO officially declared pandemic this month last year. And going back, I mean, one might ask, well, in 2003 and 2004, there was a SARS-CoV-1 which caused a havoc at that time, but that was very quickly controlled, and that was because of the success of the world coming together. And also, we need to know the virus at that time. What we know is the pathophysiology is that the transmission happened after the patient developed symptoms. and this time it's unfortunate because transmission happens in majority of them are asymptomatic, and then as well as people are pre-symptomatic, which means even before having symptoms, they're spreading the virus. So it's quite difficult to put a lid on such infections. They become like they go out without control. So there was some whispers that this was designed in the lab or this was deliberately released. It's unlikely to be any of that case, simply because if somebody has to design a virus, viruses are either RNA or DNA, which are basically nucleic acids, and they are the SARS-CoV-2. They are encased in a helmet, what we call as nucleic capsid, and that in turn is covered by an envelope. So the SARS-CoV has got all of these, and the nucleic acid, which is well hidden inside the helmet, which is well protected, carries the codes for covering this nucleocapsid, the nucleic acid itself, and the envelope. So somebody to design a virus, somebody has to be a million billion times clever than the most intellectual virologists present on the planet. So it's just like if you have a box of Lego puzzle, if you take it from a shop and bring it home, you just can't shake it and make it your end product. It's the same thing with the virus nucleic acid. So it's very likely it has mutated from a natural coronavirus, and it has taken a few steps in effectively transmitting in humans. And when in January 2020, the Chinese government published the genome of the SARS-CoV-2, which was very helpful. And very quickly, a couple of German scientists and some of the American scientists and many of the European scientists, they took this code. And mind you, there was already a pre-existing knowledge of the coronaviruses. Some people ask, how did we develop a vaccine in less than a year? To give a bit of background, the fastest vaccine which was developed prior to this vaccine is mumps vaccine, and that took less than 5 years. So developing a vaccine is not a joke. It takes years and years. So people rightly ask, how did we arrive at the vaccine in less than a year? Well, to be honest, people have been studying coronavirus for the last 40, 60 years. There have been scientists who have spent their entire life. And the German group and the Moderna group, they were nearly ready for the vaccine for a very similar coronavirus, which causes the Middle East respiratory syndrome in the Middle East, what we call as MERS-CoV. But unfortunately, because of lack of interest in that, in the final product was never achieved. So the knowledge was there, and the knowledge from the original SARS-CoV and the MERS-CoV revealed that the SARS-CoV requires a key to open the lock, and the key of the SARS-CoV-2, because of COVID-19, is the spike protein, which is present on the envelope. And it was well understood that if we try to prevent the key in attaching to the lock, we can prevent an infection or we can prevent disease. So that was the philosophy of that. And I had to say, initially it was like a clever thing to arrive at that, and they managed to identify the exact sequence which codes the key, which codes the spike protein. And very quickly they identified the entire spike protein. And all now we had to do was go into the laboratory, synthetically manufacture this nucleic acid code, which codes for the spike protein. And there are two ways of delivering this. One is, how do we deliver it inside the host? One in the Moderna and the Pfizer group came up with an idea that they can deliver this directly into the muscle by encasing it into a fatty liposomal particle. And the other method with the Oxford group or the AstraZeneca group and many other groups which have developed the non-replicating adenovirus vector vaccine, is that particular spike protein is coded onto the adenovirus virus, and which eventually, at the end of the day, all the three vaccines have a similar mechanism. So once the mRNA goes inside the muscle, what happens is the body wakes up and knows that this is something foreign, and they send something. It's a unique system what we have, the immune system, and it rushes to the site of assault, and what we call as, these are police-like cells, what we call as astrocytes, and they actually recognize this as foreign. They synthesize it. They take it to the via the lymphatic system to the nearest lymph nodes, and from there into the reticular endothelial system, and when the B and T cell immunity is developed. And when we give a second exposure, they're already patrolling. The human host recognizes, oh yes, here it comes again. But here we are, the second time they are more prepared. It's a more BAM, a powerful response from the body. So that's the idea of giving 2 vaccines, and it has to be given at least 3 to 4 weeks apart. And initially, UK chose the approach of vaccinating 10 to 12 weeks later, which I think at that time was a controversy. Personally, I did not agree at that time. But however, because it was a gamble 3 months ago, but now we know that even that the gamble has paid off, and that even giving the vaccine second dose 10 to 12 weeks is equally effective. So that's a background how we have achieved the vaccine, and all the Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and then if you have the Sputnik V vaccine, which is very similar to the adenovirus vector vaccine. Then we are going to have hopefully the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is again very similar, and the advantage of Johnson & Johnson vaccine is 1-dose vaccine. And then also we have protein-based vaccines. And again, this is similar approach, recognizing the spike protein. And that is almost also already what we call as Novavax. So multiple vaccine platforms available all across the world. And it's amazing that the whole world came together because we have to keep in mind these viruses are clever. The immune system which we have been gifted is also clever. The viruses tend to mutate, keep changing. And RNA viruses, what we call as the lack proof reading. What happens is in the way viruses replicate is not like bacteria, where bacteria go inside the human body. 1 becomes 2 bacteria, 2 becomes 4. It's like a geometric progression for bacteria. But viruses are beyond numbers. Within the same day, in a single human host, viruses from a few hundred copies can go up to a few billion copies within a matter of a day, and even up to 3 trillion copies. But the disadvantage to the virus, we could say, is that because it is replicating on such a massive scale, it does not proofread these, whether this nucleic acid is it correct or not. It tends to create errors, and that errors what we call as mutations. Sometimes the mutations can be disadvantages to the virus. It can, the virus may die out. Sometimes it confers advantage. The way it confers advantage is that the spike protein, the key, might become more better in attaching to the lock, more refined. It's like having a finer locksmith developing a finer key. And sometimes it might confer the advantage to the virus by actually going inside the cell and replicating better. And sometimes the mutation can confer, like it may not kill the host, because it doesn't serve the virus that if it kills the host. If it just gives a very mild infection, it will infect more number of human beings. So when you read this in the popular press, the mutations happening day in, day out, like in India now they say it's a double mutant. Then you've got a UK mutant and South African mutant. I mean, I would like to gently warn you not to believe the popular press in that. Popular press always likes to create heat for them to attract attention. We need to take everything with a pinch of salt. I mean, we know sometimes these mutations can confer advantage, can confer disadvantage. It's only time can tell, or experimental medicine in the laboratory can tell that. It's a bit of a speculation when people come up with all these crazy theories in advance without any proof of experimental medicine. So that's my advice on the variants. And variants will keep on coming. That's with the nature of the viruses which will in. For example, the flu vaccine, why do we get a shot every year? That's because flu viruses are more prone for mutation, more prone than SARS-CoV-2. The flu virus mutates so much that sometimes the next year it could be a massive change. Sometimes it could be a very massive change leading to a pandemic. But thank God that doesn't happen often. So every year we need to have that flu vaccine. The same thing is likely to happen with the COVID-19. The viruses will keep changing. At this point of time, none of the vaccines which have been licensed to use have been obsolete. What I mean is they are still function against the variants. They still have some have efficacy against the variants. So, but a time will come when, because of constant vaccine pressure, constant mutations, the viruses, the vaccines may lose efficacy. But at that point, we don't need to reinvent the whole wheel. We have the knowledge of manufacturing a COVID-19 vaccine virus. Now we have the knowledge. So all we have to do is we have to tweak the backbone of the vaccine, and then we don't need to again conduct massive studies. It's just a minor tweak, and we can be ready. So my guesstimation, or rather I would say a bit of speculation there, is that possibly we might have a newer vaccine probably towards the end of autumn, where all of us may still have to get the new vaccine, and maybe that will happen every year. The experts, I mean, I know because a lot of people ask me, when is this going to end? I mean, this is something which my experience with in the last 15 months is more than half the times the futuristic statements have gone wrong. So I don't want to make any futuristic statements here, but I can give a scenario. The scenario would be that vaccine is likely to be the end game. I mean, if you have to see we are not going to eradicate this virus. Don't think that one day we'll wake up and the virus is gone. No, it will not happen. The coronaviruses, we know from the knowledge we have that possibly they will melt away. The most positive hope is that they will melt away like a common cold virus. On the other hand, the most pessimistic view is that, well, this virus can become more can cause more fatality. Hopefully, it doesn't happen that way. I mean, we live in hope as human beings. And even at the end of the day, you see, one thing I would like to warn in the background is that, people are beginning, particularly in richer countries, and they are beginning to normalize this COVID-19. Now we got a vaccine now, but now you see, for example, you see flu or malaria or TB. We got they are developing vaccines against those, and there is a vaccine against flu. But despite the vaccine, there are still hundreds and thousands of deaths of flu happening in the worldwide. So we should not normalize the COVID-19. We still, it'll be a bit foolish for any of the governments across the globe to normalize this COVID-19, particularly in resource-poor countries. Now, in terms of the vaccines, I already gave you the vaccines which are available and the number of doses. And there is a global vaccine union, which is called COVAX, which I'm sure people from Ghana might have heard. And COVAX is a kind of a non-profit kind of a body where people, where resource-poor countries can get the vaccine. Ghana was the first country to get the AstraZeneca vaccine supplied via the COVAX scheme. So there are good things which have happened in this. The world has come together, irrespective of the race, religion, the color. People have worked together under one common umbrella, which is amazing. I think credit needs to go also in that direction. So, so coming back to the question, what is the future? I think possibly a vaccine is likely to be the end game, and we may have to get vaccinated possibly every year. I believe, I appreciate completely people who do not take the vaccine, and there are reasons for that. I mean, there has been 300 years of racism, which has happened in the Western world, and lo and behold, we can't just come and say, take this vaccine. Just like Dr. Valentine very cleverly said, or very wisely said, consider taking the vaccine. I mean, at this time, I can reassure you, millions of doses have been given of the Pfizer, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca vaccine, millions and millions. We're talking about more than 1 in 2 adults in UK have been vaccinated with either one of those two vaccines, Pfizer or Oxford AstraZeneca. There has been the vaccine side effects, if at all they happen in the first 4 to 6 weeks. Any vaccine side effects happen within the first 4 to. If anyone tells you something differently, ask them where they got information from. Any vaccine, for example, it's not like somebody saying, "Oh, I had my child had my MMR vaccine in 1990, and he developed a very serious disorder in 2005." It doesn't work that way. The vaccine side effects always happen within the first 45 days after having the vaccine. And more than 3 months have happened since at least more than millions of people have got vaccinated in UK. And what do we see? We don't see any kind of serious side effects. I want to mention a brief 1 or 2 lines of this AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca vaccine has got an efficacy, and the endpoint of these vaccines is not eradication, is not preventing the infection. The endpoint is preventing severe disease. The endpoint is preventing hospitalizations. And we are seeing, I mean, hopefully in UK, hopefully a reduction. And I don't think it's entirely due to the lockdown. I mean, those who have had the first and the second experience of lockdown in UK know that very well, that in the second lockdown, hardly anything was in lockdown. The traffic was same, and when compared to the previous, I mean, only the shops were closed, but the business, I think, almost was like normal. So, and the schools have been working since the last 3 or 4 weeks, and only we see a tiny, just less than 5,000 to 6,000 cases in the country. So my feeling is that possibly it is due to the vaccines, and let's hope it that way. Let's be positive that way, that this is due to vaccines, and so that's my reassurance to people that these vaccines are safe. And I'll tell you, when the Pfizer vaccine came and the Moderna vaccine came, it was such a huge relief to the scientific community. Way back in September 2020, no one had a clue that we will have a vaccine by December 2020. No one had a clue. And even if they had a clue, no one was anticipating that the efficacy of these vaccines is more than 95%. Just to tell you the fact, FDA, for example, was ready to license a vaccine which gives a protection more than 50%. This was July, and that's their policy. That's still their policy. That's why you see so many other inactivated vaccines, like Sinopharm vaccines, the Chinese vaccines. I mean, they're also equally good. I mean, they have got an efficacy of more than 50%, and that's why they have been licensed. So these are all, at the end of the day, fantastic vaccines. And when you look at their contents of the Pfizer and the Moderna and the AstraZeneca, particularly the mRNA, the Pfizer and the Moderna, how many ingredients does it have? Less than half a dozen. And when you buy any kind of processed food from a supermarket, just see how many ingredients it has. And I was shocked to hear when my son said to me, my children said that when you take chips from KFC, there are 17 ingredients, and one of the ingredients in the chips is just to maintain the originality of the chips, because the other 16 ingredients have killed the natural taste. So, I mean, when you compare that to mRNA vaccine, these are less than half a dozen. And what does it have? It has got a laboratory manufactured synthetic nuclear, the mRNA spike protein. Then it has got the other components, which are like sucrose, which is basically sugar, the cholesterol to deliver the vaccine. So it's a very tiny amount of, it doesn't have any animal products, doesn't have thiamersol, and for many of the religious communities, doesn't have any kind of harmful things which conflicts with their religion or their culture. So that's the summary of the vaccines. Yeah, I think I'll conclude it here, and I'm happy to take any questions in the Q&A forum. But again, I said it's been an honor and privilege to speak to you all, and I feel so special now that you brought me here to speak to you, and makes me feel that you are my brothers and sisters here. Thank you very much. Thank you again.
This program is brought to you by WorldRemit, a fast, reliable and better way to send money.
At WorldRemit, we understand what the journey is about, how it can sometimes take a little distance to bring us a little closer together. With ways to save more when you send more, WorldRemit is here for you, so you can be there for them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Javid. This is such an information. until you hear experts like yourself who have been on the field and understand the varieties, the variants, and all the kind of technical words that are on our shoulders every day, we take for granted how much work has gone into a whole lot of things behind the scene. And we thank you for the knowledge that you brought to us. Because of time, we'll go straight. We'll come back to Q&A, where all of us, all the panelists will be on display. But we will listen to Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan is a GP and will give us his opinion from a GP client perspective or GP patient perspective, if I may say, how he's seeing it from his room, what people are telling him, what are the myths that are still going on, anything that he really think he needs to speak to us about. So that from him, we will then be moving to the Q&A. Dr. Khan, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Christian. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to come on again. I think that, like Dr. Javid and Dr. Valentine, all that we seek to do is to allay the fears of our brothers and sisters from our community, basically. One, to just empower them with knowledge so they can make good informed choices about their health. And then two, also to help them, like both of you said, to consider taking the vaccine. I think we've done a lot of education on that to debunk quite a lot of the myth and the false rumors that are circulating in our communities. Unfortunately, with good reason, both Dr. Ngwa and Dr. Javid have excellently given us quite a lot of useful information. And certainly, after listening to both of them, I think I feel more hopeful. I've already had my 2 jabs anyway, but I think it's very useful information for our community to know so that they can confidently then go out and get the jab. But Dr. Javid made a very important point towards the end of his presentation. He's saying that even though the vaccine, he believes that a vaccine would be the end game, the disease is still with us. It's not gone anywhere. It's going to stay with us permanently. So it means that we cannot lose our guard. And this is where I get a little concerned, especially for people in our community who are refusing to take the jabs. Whilst everybody else is getting the jabs, we seem to be lagging behind. So our risks are still high. Now, many of us already know the symptoms of COVID. And over the past year, know what causes COVID, what symptoms to look out for, and certainly where to look for advice when they have the symptoms. But just quickly, most people will know that once they've encountered the virus, they might have a cough, fevers, muscle aches, tiredness and fatigue, shortness of breath, in some cases, loss of taste, loss of smell, headaches, and other symptoms that come with it. Not everybody gets this severe disease. A great majority of people do not even develop the symptoms at all, even though they are carrying the virus in their system and passing it on to others. And like both Dr. Ngwa and Dr. Javid said, some people are more vulnerable. And unfortunately, when some people get come into contact with the coronavirus, they might end up going on admission to the hospital. A number of people may develop severe disease that may not need hospital admission, but it is still more than enough to cause debilitating disease with long-term consequences as well. And we all know that severe COVID disease can affect multiple organs in the body, can affect the lungs, can affect the brain, can affect the liver, can affect the kidney, certainly the circulatory system. We've seen patients developing blood clots, for example, time and again. And certainly for me as a GP in the community, one of the things that we see when people have been discharged from intensive care and from acute care as well is that after a few weeks, they might call you still complain of shortness of breath. Sometimes you do chest x-rays, you realize that the lungs are still infected. Are you with me? And occasionally patients have developed the blood clots, either in the legs or in the lungs, after they've been discharged from a few weeks after being on admission. People are beginning to hear the term long COVID being used in the community, and certain community clinics being set up as well to manage the complications of COVID. Because once you've been discharged, make no mistake at all, if you develop severe COVID, it is by no means disappeared completely. It takes a bit of time for patients to make full recovery. Now, the symptoms that a person develops after having COVID, it depends on the severity of the infection. and still a lot of research is going on to identify the long-term problems that occur afterwards. COVID is still a new disease during this pandemic, so more research would come out so that healthcare professionals would understand that when somebody, for example, goes on intensive care, goes on the ventilators, is discharged with severe COVID, what kind of outcomes do we expect? But in the community, we're already seeing some of the severe complications that patients develop. Quite commonly with most of my patients that have been discharged from either intensive care or from being on admission with COVID, you would see the effects of severe pneumonia, for example. It takes them a while for the lungs to recover. You see patients come home, they give the GP a call after about a week or two. They say that, oh, I was treated for COVID, I've completed my medication, but when I climb upstairs, I'm feeling quite short of breath. I'm breathless after walking about 40 meters away. And especially when I try to go uphill, I'm struggling. That is true, because once you develop severe COVID affecting the lungs, some patients will develop something we call fibrosis, which is a hardening of the lung tissue. And it takes a while for the lungs to come back or develop their original texture. That is if full recovery is guaranteed anyway. I've had a number of patients calling, complain of night sweats, that at night they are sweating quite profusely, even though they've not covered themselves with duvet. Are you with me? And the temperature in the room is quite cool. During the day, they're fine. Some patients complain of fatigue. It's certainly one of the commonest things that patients are complaining about. And that is not surprising, because there are quite a number of viral conditions that will leave you with chronic fatigue, where the patient feels tired all the time. Patient feels as if I don't have the energy to do anything at all. Low mood, anxiety, poor sleep patterns have been noted as some of the complications of developing COVID disease, and certainly fast heart rate, tachycardia. I've had quite a few patients calling in saying that they are getting palpitations, and yet you do the ECG, all you see is a fast heart rate. They've been to the hospital, they've had the workup to check to see whether they were getting a heart problem. All the workups were fine. It just happens that because they've developed COVID and are recovering, the heart rate is a bit faster. It takes time for it to go down. Certainly some patients have been calling in with memory problems, concentration problems, saying that since they developed COVID or since they went on admission, they can't remember certain things. And we are reassuring them that it might take several weeks before they maintain full recovery. So make no mistake at all about it. COVID is a serious disease. And once you end up on admission, you're not going to just recover quickly over the space of just 2 to 3 weeks. Now, what do we do in the community when patients have been discharged? It depends on, 1, how long they spent on the ward, 2, whether they required any ventilation, 3, the damage that has been caused to the body organs, for example, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver, whether they developed any blood clots in the lungs, in the calves. So, and then again, it depends on the age. It also depends on some of the things that Dr. Ngwa described, whether the person has other comorbidities. We tend to see that quite commonly if somebody has multiple comorbidities, hypertension, stroke, diabetes, heart problem, before they develop severe COVID and ended up on admission, a number of them don't make it out of hospital. For those that make it, some of the patients I'm seeing have developed, for example, renal failure. Their kidneys are almost packing up. For some patients, the lungs have been so badly affected that they require oxygen back in the community as well. Luckily enough, in this country, we do have the resources to manage patients both in the hospital on outpatient basis as well as in the community. So when patients have been discharged, we do get what we call the electronic discharge letters. We do make follow-up calls. There are also community clinics, and the community teams also take up some of the follow-ups. So for patients that need follow-up x-rays, we would repeat the x-rays, we repeat the CT scans of the appropriate part of the body. And then in some cases, we may repeat the blood tests that were done in the hospital if the patient is still complaining that they don't feel better. There's also community nursing support for those who need it. We do have specialized nurses who are helping us manage the chronic kidney deterioration, as well as any cardiac complications or heart complications, any stroke. We do have occupational therapists in the community. And one of the things we're realizing, as I said, was that make no mistake at all about it. When somebody ends up on a ventilator in a hospital, there are patients that are coming out with features of post-traumatic stress disorder. They come out having all kinds of nightmares and all kinds of dreams and all kinds of mental health effects as well. The anxiety at night, the poor sleep pattern, they can't sleep because of fear. Are you with me? Some people developing depression. For some patients, we've had to signpost them to psychotherapy, counselors, to community secondary care, certainly to have some sort of counseling to help them overcome the low mood, the depression, and the features of post-traumatic stress disorder that has resulted from them being on admission for a long time. So the GP support is there. We will talk about diet. We will talk about sleep. Patients who cannot sleep, we might be able to prescribe something for them to help them sleep, because we know that adequate rest helps the body cells to recover quite well. So I have prescribed a few sleeping medication to some of my patients to enable them to sleep comfortably at night, so they wake up feeling a bit more refreshed. And then one of the challenges is to get the patient moving, the rehabilitation of the patient having been discharged from the hospital, for them to get back to normal and then to get back to work again. We try to liaise with family, with carers, to offer some support to the patients as well, because remember that patients end up with chronic fatigue, the tiredness, the weakness, the shortness of breath, on slight exertion. So the things they used to do before they had severe COVID, they struggle to do them. You'll be surprised, patients complaining that they struggle to even bath themselves once they've been discharged from the hospital. So they will need carer input. These input are in the community. For patients that are expecting to go back to work, my personal advice to them is that it takes time. You slow down, certainly work with your employer. If your employer has good occupational health, do get in touch with occupational health so that you can be risk assessed properly. And where you feel as if you can go back to work, you're not going back to work full time. There's something we call phased return. And as GPs, we can give you a medical certificate. And on the medical certificate, we can state whatever treatment you had and the fact that you need phased return. And you can take this. Phased return basically means that if you used to say work full time, you're not going to go back straight away to full time, because we have to ease you back into your normal workload. So we might recommend, for example, that you work maybe 3 out of 5 days, and out of the 3 out of 5 days, maybe if you used to do a 9 to 5 job, maybe you work half the day, you go home, and then slowly ease yourself back, because your strength is going to take time to recover. And remember that if your employer is forcing you back to work when you've not recovered fully, have a discussion with your GP. Are you with me? Because I think there are regulations around nobody being forced to go back to work. Now, there have been so many different reasons why, or barriers why, people from our BIMI community or Blacks and Asian minority ethnicity are not accepting the vaccine. Dr. Javid touched on quite some of them. You cannot erase 300 years of racism easily, no. And certainly from the experiences that our people have had in the community, different experiences, whether covertly or overtly, people are not going to just suddenly wake up in the morning and then believe every information hook, line, and sinker. One of the reasons we're doing this is to reassure them that in spite of previous racism, people have to understand that this is a worldwide concerted effort. And certainly the vaccines that we've been giving to people, certainly in my community, in the GP surgeries, there are no vaccines that say that this one is for an Asian person, this one is for a Black person, this one is for a Caucasian person. A great majority of my patients who have had the vaccines have been Caucasians. Now, I always pause and ask the question, why would they kill their own people? Why would they depopulate their own people? Why would they want their own people's genetic makeup to be changed by developing horrendous vaccines to change them? The answer is no. And certainly with modern social media, people are scrutinizing whatever is going on. So even if people have an ulterior motive, maybe to use vaccine as a means to destroy a particular ethnicity, truth eventually would come out. Are you with me? It is not like 50 years ago, 80 years ago, where a lot of things could be done covertly and things do not come out. The world is suddenly a bigger global village than we do. So some of the reasons have been the fact that trust is eroded by systemic racism and discrimination. And then the fact that there's previous unethical healthcare research in Black populations. So, some people have mentioned the Tuskegee experiment in the United States as an example where Black men were injected with the syphilis bug, just as a way. And these things don't go away easily. Plus other trials that have happened, maybe in the communities in Asia and communities in Africa as well. They would never go away. And these have sown seeds of doubt. Our communities do not trust politicians. They don't. Basically, they don't trust what the media say. They don't trust what politicians say because of hidden agenda. And they've long held suspicion that reporters and scientists and government officials are collaborating to hide the real fact about coronavirus and the COVID vaccine. I always keep challenging those in authority that trust must be maintained. That trust has to be there. If they want our communities to take up the vaccine, then they have to be very clear in terms of how they collaborate with our community. Some people reason is that they think that big pharma or the big pharmaceutical companies are out there to make money. And certainly there were people, some of my colleagues from the healthcare system who quoted certain trials, discredited trials. I remember one particular trial discrediting hydroxychloroquine, for example. There were people from some of our countries who said that, well, if you take a country like Ghana, we may not be able to afford, have the millions to buy the vaccines in bulk quantities. Where is the money going to come from? So if there are treatments like hydroxychloroquine or things like doxycycline, ivermectin, medications like this that can help our community, why are people designing trials to, for example, falsely label these medications as either ineffective or quite bad? And a lot of these trials were sponsored by Big Pharma. So it tends to create a bit of doubt or sows seed of doubts in the minds of our community that, hold on, what is going on? Are we being forced to take up a vaccine so that some people can make billions of dollars? And then you look at the vaccine wars or the political shenanigans, if I have to use that word, that is going on between the UK, the EU in terms of vaccine efficacy and the clots and whatever. And sometimes it is more than enough to then start sowing doubts in people's mind. But I think using this forum, we can tell our people that, look, as far as we're concerned with the information that we're presented with, it is safe and efficient and effective to have the vaccine. And nobody is out there to destroy our community. Some people have quoted the 5G conspiracy theory as a way, for example, of Big Brother monitoring people from our community that, for example, and I read in some of our social media platforms, some of the videos circulating, that the reason for the two vaccine strategy is that the first vaccine primes you. It primes the body's DNA or RNA. And then when the second vaccine contains something like a chip that allows people to be monitored using satellites from space, basically. Now, I don't think that is the reason for the two vaccine strategy to help us. Basically, it is just to boost the immune system, not to introduce any chip into anybody's skin or anybody's body for Big Brother or big governments to monitor us from afar. We are being monitored anyway, as long as you have a modern phone, and as long as your date of birth is out there, and as long as you have a bank card with a chip, and as long as you have a credit card, and as long as when you're traveling, you submit yourself to fingerprints and iris scans and whatever. Make no mistake at all about it. Your information is out there in outer space. You can't hide, you can't run. So there's no need to be scared about any chip that is coming. And again, finally, one of the reasons people are not taking up the vaccine is the healthcare experiences of BAME people within the NHS. And I keep telling people that even for me, as a healthcare professional, I've been to A&E with my son, and the experience wasn't pleasant to talk about. And until I mentioned, I challenged the person who was looking after my son, I challenged him and told him that I was a clinician myself, and that was my local hospital. I come there for teaching, I come there for training, I come there to interact with my other colleagues. And he was just a locum, he didn't know me. But I told him that if my color was different, my son would have been treated in a different way, and my experiences would have been better. And I made it clear to him. And my probably point to those from the Bemi backgrounds is that, look, challenge, if you go anywhere and you have to access health, challenge people, ask questions. When our people come in, one of the things I realize, they don't ask questions. They don't. And it comes from our cultural backgrounds, our knowledge, our attitudes, our practices, our ideas, our concerns, our expectations that the doctor is almost like God in the communities where we come from, in our countries. So people don't question healthcare professionals when they go. But I would encourage them that, look, when you call the practice nurse, when you call your GP, when you speak to your GP, certainly when you speak to specialists like Dr. Javid and Dr. Ngwa, question them, ask the questions. If they give you a treatment, ask questions. Don't be afraid at all. Don't be afraid that, and if somebody shows any covert racism or overt racism, challenge them and out them, report the matter so that we can eradicate this. Otherwise, then our health outcomes, our health care experiences are going to continue that way until we start challenging some of these practices, whether be it in hospital, be it in general practice as well. And then so that with time, I believe that this health inequality and marginalization of ethnic minorities who seek treatment probably might improve. And to the point where our people will confidently take up vaccines, will confidently seek treatment, will confidently manage their chronic diseases much better. And I think I'll end here. And I believe that any questions that come out would be addressed through the question and answer session. So once again, thank you, Mr. Kwesim, for the opportunity to be part of this session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. This is very great. It's great. I mean, you have given it the finishing touch of the clinicians and the consultants who were also dealing on specific aspects of the whole pandemic and how they have been involved in their areas and all that. Thank you so much. You are one of the people that people like myself will run to you every morning and ring you the first time I have headache and all that. So when we have the GPs on, along with the experts in the big hospitals and other areas, it helps because you can articulate our views and our concerns as well. Thank you very much for being with us. Can I just say that this program, again, is being brought to you in partnership with Ghana Union, Ghana Nurses Association, UK, the Western Region Association of Nurses, UK, the Nightingale Nurses Association, UK, and supported by Ghana High Commission, and Ghanaian Doctors and Dentists Association, UK. We also have a support from World Remit, who is helping us to broadcast this to you. And we have Omega Live supporting as well, carrying it on their platform to the wider audience across the world. At this point, we will go back to the question and answer session. But before we do, we will, having heard all this good information from this expert, we will have to take a poll to find out exactly what we think of ourselves now from where we were when we started. These polls are important. We want you to take part because it helps us to tailor our services to your needs and be able to identify the topics that need to be addressed going forward. So please, we encourage you to take part. Thank you so much. It helps us to put the program together better. So I'm guessing that most of you would have put some questions on the chat room. I believe that from here, we'll be going straight to Q&A, where I am hoping that all of you, the audience, would have had enough questions to ask to engage our panelists, to keep them busy till the end of this session. We have about 45 minutes left, and your questions are very key. So we are going to be calling people. If you have any questions, go to the chat, the Zoom options, and raise your hand so that we can call you straight away. I also have some pre-event questions that I'll be going through, and I'll be asking those questions at random based on how many people's hands are up on the chat, on the Zoom hand raising icons. So I'm hoping that as many of you who have questions will raise your hand, and I will endeavor to call you within the time that we have. We have experts tonight who are very key to the discussion today, and I encourage you to feel free and ask your questions, and I'm sure they will do their best to address it. Okay, the polling is done. We will come back to you with the answers. We'll go straight to the Q&A. If I can if my team, technical team, can project, please, the doctors on the screen, so the audience know them by face, and hopefully with their names underneath, we can try to go back to the Q&A sessions. We have one hand up, and I'll be calling one from the team. If I may call Winifred, please. I've got one person called Winifred iPad. I guess that is not your surname, but obviously, Winifred, if Winifred can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes, hello, good evening, and thanks for the great presentation. I have a question which I'm asking on behalf of a patient, actually. With the birth of all these new vaccines, then it also creates doubts in people's minds as to which one to actually go for. So this patient has had a history of CVA in the past, like a stroke in the past, and they also have got a history of deep vein thrombosis. So with all the information coming out and people saying about complications to do with some of the vaccines, then they are in a dilemma as to which of the vaccines to actually consider. So is there any advice to give to a patient like this who is concerned as to which of the vaccines to consider?
Please, any panelist with some advice on this top question, please feel free to take it and add to it others as you feel fit. I guess Sedna is intending to speak, and anybody can add to it.
Hello. In terms of the vaccine, this patient can have either of the vaccines. There's no reason why they need to have one or the other. They're both just as safe and just as effective for the patient. The fact that they've had a stroke or deep vein thrombosis is not going to affect the outcome for the patient. So either of the vaccines. Just to say, I work in a COVID vaccination clinic, so I am a pharmacist and I answer a lot of questions from patients, and quite often patients do ask that. But when you arrive at the clinic, you will have whichever vaccine is being used on that day. If there is a clinical reason why you shouldn't have a vaccine offered, then alternative arrangements will be made for you. So we may have a patient who comes in and has got a history of very severe allergies, anaphylaxis, and we might feel that it's not safe to immunize them in our clinic. We will arrange for them to go to the hospital to have their clinic have their vaccine under close supervision. But as far as we know, there isn't an underlying condition that precludes you from having one or the other than generally allergy tends to be the reason. And even then, it depends on what the person is allergic to and how severe the allergy is.
Thank you. Would anyone want to add to it, please?
I think the only thing I was going to add to what Sadina said was that on our GP records, we have so many patients who claim they have certain allergies. Sometimes you would have, you speak to a patient and they say that, I was diagnosed with penicillin allergy when I was young. But then when you ask certain pertinent questions, you realize that maybe when they started taking the penicillin, they had a little bit of a rash, which was coincidental. And since then, they've had amoxicillin or co-amoxiclav or other medications, which doesn't really prove that they've had penicillin allergy. And yet, because of all that this information, then they decline to have the vaccine. So like Sadina is saying, we would ask a bit more information and reassure them that it is safe. And if it's not safe, we'll make arrangement at our local hospitals for them to have it. That's all.
Thank you very much. I will ask one question from the ones I received before. There's a question about if any of you can clarify exactly how many vaccines are registered in UK for administration, and what are their basic side effects. So I think the person is trying to say, we have two vaccines in operation. Do they all have the same side effect, or one has something different from the other? Can the expert elaborate on it for us, please?
Okay, so at the moment in the UK, we have two vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine. But we also have a third vaccine, which is the Moderna vaccine. Now, we don't know the exact date that we'll be using it, but all three vaccines have been considered by our regulatory authority, and all three of them have been authorized for use. In terms of the side effects, to be honest, they are pretty much the same. Some patients get them, others don't. But generally, it tends to be feeling feverish, headache, aches, all of which tend to be transient. Recently, the advice is that if you have a headache, for instance, for more than 4 days, then you do need to speak to your doctor. But generally, the side effects, and I've worked in a clinic that's immunized probably close to 100,000 patients now, and the side effects are pretty much the same with those vaccines. I wouldn't say that one has different side effects to the other. It's the same side effects that a baby would have when they have their immunization. So temperature, fever, chills, muscle ache, a pain at the site of injection, but not a lot else, thankfully.
Okay. So what would you say to someone, two people with the same age group, no pre-existing condition, taking the same vaccine, and one had side effect, one didn't have anything at all other than a pain in the arm where the vaccine was administered? What would you say to those two people?
I would say that we're all very different. So in the same way that we all take medication and it works for one person and it doesn't work for the other, it's exactly the same. So our bodies are the ones doing the work. So when the vaccine is given to you, your body does the rest of the work. So because our bodies are all different, you will see different reactions in different patients. But ultimately, the outcome in terms of protection against severe disease, hospitalization, or death is the same for both patients. If they have no underlying conditions, then they're pretty much similar.
Right. Thank you. I'll go to the chat and I call on somebody called Dr. NL Ampefi.
Dr. Mpafe, thank you.
Mpafe, please.
I'm very grateful for this wonderful presentation by the panelists. My question is for you, Dr. Javed Ahmed. Can you please expand a little bit as to why we produce those vaccines with a limit just in a year? Can you just expand on that so that we understand why we were able to produce this vaccine in less than 12 months? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mpafe. Right, okay, expanding on what I said earlier, the knowledge of producing a vaccine was there. We had nearly produced a MERS-CoV vaccine, but unfortunately, because there was a lack of interest, because people realized, particularly in the country, that it was limited to geographic location.
I think, Dr. Javid, your voice again is gone to the lower end of it. If
Okay.
you can
you hear me now?
Yes, I can. I guess the audience can too.
Yeah, Dr. Mpafe, thank you. So, expanding on what I said earlier, the knowledge of manufacturing, the knowledge of producing vaccine in the laboratory was available already with the MERS-CoV bit, and unfortunately that did not see the light of the day because it was in the richer resource area thought it was limited only to geographic MERS-CoV. And also in the background, there has been a lot of work with the adenovirus vector vaccine for viral hemorrhagic. So the platforms were there and the knowledge was there, and we knew from the beginning when the genetic code was mapped back in January 2020, that the spike protein nucleic acid component was the full spike protein nuclear code was, we were aware of that. So all we had to do was produce that nucleic acid code, synthetically insert into the human cell, or like what the Chaddock's group, the Oxford group did, is to insert into genetically in a live adenovirus, which is a replication deficient virus vaccine. So that knowledge was made very quickly available. Now, how did we manufacture? How did we come up with this? The problem is, in the last few decades, the governments across the world have spent very little on preventive health. And you'll be shocked to see some of the African countries, like, for example, Rwanda, has performed much, much better in response to the pandemic than United States of America last year alone, because the amount of the money they invest in preventive care is far, far more. That has led to a lack of interest in vaccine manufacturing production. So which led, when this pandemic arose, which led for the governments to fall back to commercial manufacturers like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, big, where they can massively produce millions of doses. The government did not have the technological know-how. The pharmaceutical companies had the technological know-how. I'm not, let me put a disclaimer here. I should have said this earlier. I do not have any conflict of interest to declare. I do not get any monies, no monies to speak, I do not take any monies neither here in this forum nor in any of the previous forums. And I have not got involved in any kind of money-based pharmaceutical investments at all. So we had to rely on the big giant pharmaceutical companies in using the technological know-how and manufacturing those vaccines. And given the fact you are in the middle of a pandemic, people are dying, we cannot sit and wait and say, let's wait for 5 years and see the efficacy of this vaccine, see how safe the vaccine is. We do not have the luxury. We had to produce a vaccine, and it will baffle us if we have the technological know-how, if we have the scientific know-how. Why not roll it out to the general public instead of waiting for 5 to 6 years to wait for the data to come out? I think that's how. Please keep in mind, it's not like 1 year of research in this or 15 months of research. The people, one particular expert I spoke in America is Professor Susan Weiss. She has spent 40 years in coronavirus research. There are people who have spent 40 to 50 years of their life only on coronaviruses. And there have been efforts to manufacture coronavirus vaccines for other human coronaviruses as well as for animal coronaviruses. It's just that they didn't see the light of the day. But here, fortunately, we have seen, because of in the middle of the hot pandemic, we had to, in the global world, had to respond to it. I hope that allays some of your fears or some of your questions. If not, I can go into further detail if you would like.
I can add to that as well. I think the key thing people need to remember is that we have vaccine experts across the world. We found ourselves in a pandemic that affected everybody across the world. And so that was a real motivation for collaboration between all the experts across the world. The other interesting thing about this trial was that a lot of us healthcare professionals enrolled for the trials because equally we knew that we needed to do something and do something really quick. And so it was very easy to get people to join the trial. I'm an ex-clinical trials pharmacist, and normally when the trial is on, each phase is done in order. So you start looking at safety, you look at animal studies, then you move on to healthy volunteers, etc. With this study, the phases were overlapped. So you didn't wait for the first phase to finish before you started the next phase. And that helped to condense the time in which the vaccine was produced, not because any steps were skipped, but because we needed this thing urgently. As soon as they could see that there was promise, the next stage started. The other thing, as we'll all know, is that obviously manufacture of medicines is a commercial activity. And normally companies will be developing something and keep all the information quiet and secret because obviously they want to get to the end and reap the benefits. But in this case, the companies came together. So the code for the virus was shared. Every time information was available, it was shared. And so it just meant that things moved at a pace that was required, essentially. And remember that as we've all taken the vaccine and we can already see all the fantastic results that we're seeing here in the UK, all the reports that we give about our side effects, etc., that all adds to the data and the evidence that's available. So this is one vaccine. I mean, I've been a pharmacist for close to 30 years. I have never seen a product that has been monitored as closely as this. So we can be rest assured that there's collaboration, that we can trust these products. I work in the clinic, I draw up the medication. When I have people who are nervous or worried, I tell them to come into the clinic when I am there. So they know that, as Dr. Khan said, well, I'm not going to do something to destroy the race that I come from, okay? So when you come into our clinic, you will see vaccinators that look like you. You will see me running around in my purple scrubs. You will see doctors and other nurses and other healthcare professionals. So you can trust that. You know, I've had my 2 jabs. I'm absolutely fine. And many of the people on here, I'm sure, have had theirs too. So please consider it. It's the best decision you will make. You're on mute, Emmanuel. You're on mute.
Sorry, my apologies. How long does immunity last in the system, in your body, when you've taken the vaccine? And also, the next question, if I may follow with that, is that the first one is how long vaccine immunity lasts, and the other one is, could taking 2 different vaccines boost the effectiveness at the same level?
Okay.
So how long does it last? Are we talking about a year or 6 months or 2 years or 5 years? And if by any incident you end up taking 2 different vaccines from the first and the second, do the effectiveness still work the same, given that all the vaccines have different efficacy levels and all that?
Emmanuel, I am happy to take the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, with respect to immunity, people have been looking at the other coronaviruses, how long the immunity lasts, to see extrapolate how long our memory cells will last. With respect to this vaccine, it's too early to speculate or to even to hypothesize how long the immunity will last. But what we know from other coronaviruses, the MERS-CoV and the other medical coronaviruses, is that the immunity seems to last 1 to 2 years, the B cell immunity, and there is another important arm, the memory cell, the T cell immunity. And the T cell immunity seems to last for at least 4 to 5 years. Now, there was a paper which was published end of last month, the amazing paper from Seattle, which looked at another coronavirus, and they looked at the population neutralizing antibodies for 9E, that's the name of the coronavirus, from way back from 1982, and they followed up for nearly 20 years. And the response, the neutralizing antibodies for that coronavirus. And what they found was, because the coronaviruses keep mutating, okay, the immunity also kept changing. And there's one fantastic discovery which has been published in January in a major article. Not only the viruses which have the advantage of mutation, but also it appears that the coronaviruses, the host immune system, also tends to think 2 steps ahead and think, this virus may do this, I'm going to be ready with this antibody. So this is an amazing thing in immunology which has been recently been identified, and this is happening with the coronaviruses as well. So it appears to me that the immunity will last. Maybe like a B cell immunity may last for 6 months to a year, or even up to 1 to 2 years. But keep in mind there is an intact T cell immune response as well. But the bottom line is, because this is a game, this is a constant interaction between the virus and the host, and the immune system is not sleeping, the virus is not sleeping. Both are equal players in the battle, and the virus will try to get ahead. But at the same time, the technology will be there to tweak the vaccines, and that's why I was saying that we may have to end up using the annual vaccine jab every year. And the bottom line is, immunity for the original vaccine will last for a good year or 2 at least.
All right. Thank you. Would anyone want to add to it, or I should take? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to call someone from the audience. We hope Augusta, if you want to come up, please, with your question, Augusta. We have Augusta with your hand up. If you're still with us, please.
Yes, please. I am still here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwesi, for the opportunity to ask this question, and thank you also for our panelists for fantastic presentation so far. I would like to find out from any of our panelists. I have come to realize that when you go for the vaccine, you don't have the choice. When you go there, they offer whichever, either AstraZeneca or Pfizer. I would like to find out if there's any criteria at all as to the choice of vaccine for an individual when you go to these vaccination centers.
I can answer.
Thank you, Augusta. I'm sure.
Yeah, I said that at the beginning. So there isn't a choice, and simply because on any one day when we have the clinic, we use whatever vaccine is given to us. It's as simple as that. So when we get the vaccine in and we set up the clinic, when your appointment is being booked, so there are two different types of clinics, which you may or may not know. So we have the large clinics and we have the GP-based clinics. In the large clinics, they would only have one type of vaccine at the time. At the GP-based clinics, they get both vaccines, but not always at the same time. So basically, when your appointment is made, it is made knowing that you will get a vaccine, okay? Now, remember what I said, they're both as good as each other, okay? So, and they're both as safe as each other. So there's actually no particular reason other than allergy, as I said before, where a patient has very severe allergies that has meant hospitalization, or they've had severe allergy, but we're not sure what it is. In that case, if we were using Pfizer, we wouldn't give them the Pfizer vaccine, we would give them the AstraZeneca vaccine. But generally, you don't have a choice. But what I say to people is, consider yourself blessed that you have a vaccine, because both of them are just as good as each other.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Sadina said, that we do get patients calling us asking whether they've got a choice. And interestingly, almost all the patients that are asking are from our community. Yes, simply, most people would not want the Pfizer vaccine for some reason. They would want to get the AstraZeneca vaccine simply because it's a more conventional vaccine compared to the Pfizer, which uses the mRNA technology. I've had to field quite a number of those questions, and unfortunately, we don't have the choice. And like Sadina said, it's a blessing to even have access to any vaccine at all, because the situation is not the same elsewhere outside of this country. Both of them are equally effective. And as Dr. Javid has reassured us, and I feel so empowered after listening to him, that it is safe, it is efficient, and it's okay for us to have it. Yeah.
Thank you. Add something to that before you go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Ngwa.
That just also add to the second of your first question that you asked. I think for the first dose, yes, it's anyone that's available. But I think once you had the first dose, the second dose is usually the one that you had in the first dose. I think the guideline at the moment is exceptionally warranted. You should always get the same one you had in the first dose. There is because one of your questions was whether mixing them had be more efficacious. I think there is a trial ongoing now. It has about 8 arms. They're going to compare the AstraZeneca for 3 weeks. Sorry, Pfizer 3 weeks, Pfizer 12 weeks, Pfizer AstraZeneca 3 weeks, Pfizer AstraZeneca 12 weeks, just like that. And then come up and see whether it makes any difference. Only then we will have more information whether you can mix and match. But for now, it's the same both ways.
Thank you.
On the mix and matching as well, if you have one type of vaccine and you have an allergic reaction, depending on the reaction, you might not get the same vaccine the next time. So you'll be referred probably to a specialist center, a specialist clinic. You might have, say if you had Pfizer and you reacted, you might have the AstraZeneca. And we do know that it is allowed. So in the Green Book, it does say it's allowed. There may be other circumstances where, for instance, a patient was in hospital when they had their vaccine, and they may have had one type of vaccine, particularly Pfizer. They come into the community and they're housebound or they're in a care home. And because we can't take the Pfizer vaccine, generally we don't take it. They may end up having an AstraZeneca, but that will be discussed with their doctor, and they will be given that prescribed specially for them. So there are times, sometimes people come from other countries as well. So that's the other thing, that people may have had their first dose because they've been abroad, they've had their first dose, they come back to the UK, they need to have the second one, and it may be that they have to have a different one. But they can be rest assured that, as far as we can see, it's not detrimental, because remember what I said, it's your body doing the work. Okay, all the vaccine does is present the scenario to you, so you're prepared when the virus comes for real. Okay, so having the two different vaccines at the moment, we haven't got any reason to believe it wouldn't be a great idea. But as you said, the trials are ongoing and they will be conclusive and will guide our practice in future.
Thank you. I think it will be worth asking this question. Yesterday, I was speaking to someone close to me in Ghana here. He's a frontline worker. He's been offered one of the 600,000 vaccines from AstraZeneca, and he's refused to take it because his view is that the vaccines being given in Europe is different from the one that has been sent to Ghana. I don't know how true this is, but this is something that is lingering around here. Can one of you really give us an assurance so that as a community that we are doing this for, being a country to have received it first, we are not giving them different vaccine from what I took back in UK?
Emmanuel,
they're all manufactured in the same way. The bottle might look different, but that is because in different countries, medication does look different. So I think the vial in Ghana is green and the one that we have here is white, but they're all made, I think they've been made in India, Serum India, and they make the vaccine that we use here. And if anybody was watching the TV this morning, you would have seen how it gets bottled here in the UK. So it just looks slightly different. It has a red top here in the UK. It had a green top in Ghana. And actually we've had some of the green top here in the UK as well. So people have nothing to worry about. Many people have had their first doses in Ghana and are coming back confidently to have the second dose here when they return back home. And I would say Ghanaians are lucky to have had that vaccine arrive on the shores of Ghana so quickly. If they are offered the vaccine, just look at what's happening across Europe, where there isn't enough vaccine for people. In Ghana, it is there, it is waiting for you. If you are able to go and have it, please go and have it. You're doing the best thing you can for yourself, your family, and your community.
Thank you.
All right. I was just going to add to guarantee that the vaccine that is being sent there is not different from the vaccine that is being sent to Europe or maybe to the Western world. Sometimes it's so difficult. It is a question of trust. Now, sometimes I do ask people from our community that when you go to the supermarket to buy chicken, do you know how it was grown? When you buy your products from the supermarket, do you know how it was grown? A lot of the foreign, what do you call it, imported meat, chicken, medications that are sent to Africa, do our medicines regulatory agencies actually scrutinize it quite effectively? Do we know what is in there? Certainly we hear the stories. When people are buying other products online, people shop online, they buy other products. Do they actually know the authenticity of it? I think it is all a question of trust. And certainly, I do reassure people that if you think that somebody is going to be clever to destroy our population, okay, they would probably put whatever they're going to do in childhood vaccinations. As I keep saying, that if you want to change the DNA of an ethnicity, you start from when they're babies. By the time they hit 30 years or 40 years, you would see whatever change you want to see. Not when people are already 70 and 80 and 90 is when you want to create a genetic change in their code. It doesn't make sense to me, even if I'm a very wicked scientist. So it doesn't make any sense to anybody. We take yellow fever vaccines easily. We don't question. We take hepatitis A, typhoid when we're traveling. We take all these vaccinations without even questioning at all. So why is it that there is so much fear with the COVID vaccine? My personal advice would be that people should trust the process at least. They've had many of us who work within the healthcare sector, and I don't think we would sit here asking our people to just go gung-ho and take the vaccine if we thought that it was not safe at all.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. I guess Dr. Dr. Javid wanted to say something earlier on.
I was just going to add to what Dr. Khan said. So here's the deal, people. As people are become more and more hesitant about having the vaccine, what's going to happen very soon is that this disease will become more prevalent in our community. So it will go from a global pandemic. It will start to narrow to the communities that are hesitant. And if we're not careful, it will become a Black person's disease.
That's my fear. Yeah.
At that point, when the vaccine is being made, it is being made for Black people. So I say to people, join the queue that has got different ethnicities and different backgrounds right now, because at least now you know it, everybody's getting the same vaccine. If you don't trust it now, you're going to find it very hard to trust it when it becomes a disease that's only seen in certain ethnicity. Okay, so just remember that if you're feeling a bit hesitant about, think about it. Join the queue where the person in front of you may be Chinese and the person behind you might be English. Okay, because trust me, you're getting it from the same vial because I'm in the room drawing it up. Okay, I know that.
Thank you. I'll ask one question from Brother G. The name is Brother G. If you're still with us, please ask your question, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kwesi and all the panelists. You've been telling us that both AstraZeneca and Pfizer are more or less the same in terms of, its efficacy. However, we keep hearing different percentages of efficacy levels between these two vaccines. And it appears that Pfizer has a much higher efficacy level. So how comes that you're telling us it's all the same? Plus, the other issue is we are told AstraZeneca is much cheaper. And of late, almost everywhere you go is AstraZeneca. Where you get Pfizer is for those who are having a second dose. So it appears that the government or whoever has actually more or less stopped Pfizer. Some people even want to know about AstraZeneca. Can you please explain this to us? Thank you.
It's interesting you have a question that most panelists want to speak about. So Dr. Javid, please, you start and then Sedna will complement it.
I will take the first question and leave the second question to Sedina. In response to you, I probably have never said that the efficacy of AstraZeneca and Pfizer are similar. No.
Exactly, yeah.
No. I am quoting the papers published, and the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna are more than 95% in preventing severe COVID-19. Full stop. But that's for Pfizer and Moderna. The efficacy of AstraZeneca is somewhere between 60 to 80%. The figures keep changing. So the two vaccines in that kind of context are not the same. I was probably saying, I think probably this is where I should have been clear, my apologies. The mechanism of action of the vaccines are similar. The Pfizer and the Moderna code for the spike protein, code for the key, and they purely contain the nucleic acid spike protein. Whereas the AstraZeneca vaccine contains the spike protein coding, but it is encased in a replication deficient adenovirus vaccine. Okay. So, but eventually when it gets inside a cell, the mechanism is similar. But the end result in terms of its efficacy, and these are well documented when you look at the Lancet and the news. So my apologies if I had not been clear earlier. So I think your next question was more pertaining to pharmaceutical things. I'll leave it to Sabina.
Hi, Brother G. Thank you for your question. So I think for me personally, when I talk about the vaccines, I don't tend to use these percentages because I think they're quite misleading. Each clinical trial measures their outcome slightly different, and the endpoint that they're looking for in the trial is very different as well. Having said that, a lot of the vaccines that we use today have efficacy quoted around 50%. So actually, in terms of these vaccines, they're all doing very, very, very well. And I wouldn't get hung up on the percentages. This one's 95, that one's 96, extra, because I think that can be quite misleading for people. I think the thing people need to remember is that the vaccines are effective at reducing hospitalization, serious illness, and death. That's the key thing. Now, you asked about AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca is sold at cost. Okay. Now remember, if you can cast your mind back to a year ago, okay, the UK, as I said at the beginning, the reason why the trials went faster than they normally would was because there was a lot of financial support from the government. Our government here in the UK backed the AstraZeneca vaccine, okay? It was researched and developed here in the UK. And we placed a larger order of that than we did Pfizer. So if you look in the US, they're using Pfizer because that's where they put their money. We supported AstraZeneca. The other thing about the two vaccines is that the AstraZeneca one is more portable. We can take that out because it doesn't require the ultra cold temperature change. That is why the AstraZeneca one is in Ghana, for instance, because trying to maintain that ultra cold temperature is very, very difficult. So actually, when I'm working in the clinic, if I'm honest, the AstraZeneca is so much easier to handle. You don't have to dilute it. You don't have to worry about not shaking it. It's just far easier to use. Okay, and back to your question about why is it that you can't get Pfizer anywhere at the moment, is because what we said before, when we've given you a Pfizer vaccine, and remember that came out first, okay? So if you've had a Pfizer vaccine, we're wanting to give you a second Pfizer vaccine. We can't use that Pfizer vaccine to give someone else a first dose because we want to make sure that you get 2 Pfizer vaccines. So that's the reason why at the moment it's more difficult to get a Pfizer vaccine because we're in the throes of doing second doses at the moment, okay? That's why the AstraZeneca is available. That came on board later, okay? So that's the reason. So there's nothing behind it, okay? I just want people to understand that there's nothing behind it. There really isn't. I wouldn't put my credibility on the line if I felt that there was. I hope I answered your question, Brother G.
Emmanuel,
Yes.
Just to clarify, Brother G, just to clarify, I appreciate where Sadina is coming from. However, I do not speak on behalf of any of the government agencies or anything like that whatsoever. I am here only to quote the figures what are published in peer-reviewed journals. My role is to give you the information which is there out in scientific literature. And that's why I'm happy to quote the figures. I cannot add anything more of a personal experience to that. I can see the practicality of one vaccine over the other, but I'm not here to promote any one of the vaccine over the other. The vaccines, when it comes your chance, when your turn comes, take whichever vaccine you have. But I'm not here to promote any one vaccine over the other. And the figures are important for anybody who asks because they have in phase 3 and trials published, and we cannot debate with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've got a few more minutes to go. We've got a few questions to ask. I'm sure the next 10 minutes we may have to round up. But before we do, we'll go to the next poll and we'll do one or two things and give the panelists some chance to grab some water to clear their throat for the next 2 minutes. So the next poll will come, as you can see. If you help us to take it, it will help us to shape the way we provide you this forum and the information that needs to be put together to meet your needs. While the poll is going on, let me acknowledge the support and the cooperation from Ghana Nurses Association UK, Ghana Union UK, Western Region Nurses Association UK, and the Nightingale Nurses Association for coming together, working diligently, and putting this together. I also want to recognize the work done by the technical team behind the scene, Linda, Paul, and Lillian, who are working so hard behind the scenes to make sure this presentation comes to you wherever you are. We thank them so much for their effort. We want to thank the acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge the support of Ghana High Commission, Ghanaian Doctors and Dentists Association for giving us the support in delivering this service. And also finally, World Remit for helping us reach to as many as possible. World Remit, your best, efficient, reliable way of sending money to family and friends in abroad, specifically Ghana. Thank you so much. Now, I believe the poll is done. My colleague Linda from the technical team will deliver the poll result to us just before we close. So please keep with us so that you can know how well we are doing as a community. Also, our next program will be held 2 weeks from today, the same time, same place, same login details. And this time we are now going to start considering some of the psychosocial impact of the COVID-19 on our community. As you can see, the community has been left broken, distance from each other, isolation, anxiety, stress, financial burden, domestic violence, everything else that you can think of. We are going to be part of dealing with this in the foreseeable future. So it's about time we start focusing the month of April, looking at these issues, helping you to find some of the areas that you can seek support, guide you through some of the pain that you're going through, as I'm sure we have all in our own individual way done so. I think so far so good. The issue about vaccination and the corona has been brought to you from all spectrum. Everyone has done their bit, and we are now going to start focusing a bit more on what can we do to help the community, the people, alongside helping you to decide on your vaccination. We must also be seen to help you come out of the situation that we all find ourselves in. Thank you very much. So that will be happening on the 9th of April, Friday the 9th of April, same time, 7 p.m. And your login details, there's no passcode needed. Everything stays the same. Thank you very much. Now, there's two more questions from my side, which came in advance. Can I still donate blood after taking my vaccine? Is it okay to go and give the blood donation either in the course of the two vaccines or after the two vaccines has been taken? And then if I may add the last one so that you all have it together. In between the vaccines, can I take alcohol? And what percentage can I take?